The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant cheers of graduates and the crunch of gravel under my feet as I walked away. The diploma felt like a lead weight in my hand, a cruel mockery of the years of hard work I had poured into something my own family couldn't even be bothered to acknowledge. My throat tightened with a knot of unshed tears, each one a burning reminder of the chasm that separated me from the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. They thought they had broken me, but in that moment, a different kind of strength was born, a resolve hardened by betrayal and fueled by the promise of a future where their indifference would no longer touch me. If your own blood has ever let you down, subscribe now and find your true family here. It wasn't an accident. That's what made the crimson sting so intensely. My graduation was marked on every calendar in the house, a bright red circle screaming for attention amidst the mundane appointments and grocery lists. I had reminded them countless times, giddy with excitement and the innocent expectation that they would share in my joy. I had imagined my mother beaming with pride, my father capturing the moment with his old camera, my siblings playfully teasing me about finally escaping the clutches of academia. Instead, the morning of my graduation dawned with an eerie calmness, the house quiet except for the murmur of the television and the clatter of dishes as my brother prepared himself a late breakfast. When I asked where everyone was, he simply shrugged, his eyes glued to the screen. Dad had some important business to take care of, he mumbled. Mom went with him, and Sarah and Mark are somewhere. I remember feeling a cold dread wash over me, a premonition that this was more than just a simple oversight. Addison, that's my name. And Addison knew something wasn't right. I forced a smile, grabbed my cap and gown, and told myself that maybe, just maybe, they would be waiting for me at the ceremony. But as I walked across that stage, my eyes scanned the crowd, searching for familiar faces in a sea of strangers. The hope that had flickered within me slowly began to extinguish. The empty seats reserved for my family spoke volumes, a silent testament to their calculated neglect. Later, when I returned home, diploma in hand, the house was still empty. A note lay on the kitchen counter, scrawled in my mother's handwriting. "Sorry we missed it. We'll celebrate later." The words felt hollow, devoid of any genuine remorse.
That night, I overheard a conversation that shattered the last vestiges of my naive belief in their love. My parents were in the living room, their voices hushed but laced with a chilling indifference. "She's always been so dramatic," my mother sighed. "Honestly, I just didn't feel like sitting through that boring ceremony." My father chuckled. "Besides, Mark needed help with his car. That's far more important than Addison's little accomplishment." The casual cruelty of their words cut deeper than any knife. It wasn't just that they had forgotten my graduation, it was that they had deliberately chosen to prioritize other things, other people, over me. I realized then that I had always been an afterthought in my family, a supporting character in a drama where my siblings were the stars. My accomplishments were minimized, my dreams dismissed, my very existence overshadowed by their perceived superiority. The weight of years of neglect pressed down on me, suffocating me with the realization that I was nothing more than a convenient prop in their carefully constructed narrative. The person I trusted most was one of them. My older sister, Sarah, had always been my confidant, the one I turned to when I felt lost or alone. We had shared secrets, dreams, and countless late-night conversations. I had always believed that she understood me, that she saw beyond the surface and recognized the person I truly was. But as I replayed the events of the day in my mind, I remembered a subtle smirk on her face when I told her about my graduation, a fleeting flicker of something that now seemed like disdain. The pieces began to fall into place, revealing a pattern of subtle sabotage and undermining comments that I had previously dismissed as harmless sibling rivalry. Sarah had always been jealous of my academic achievements, resentful of the attention I received from teachers and mentors. She had secretly reveled in my setbacks, subtly encouraging me to doubt myself and question my abilities. And now, I realized, she had been complicit in my family's deliberate act of exclusion, a willing participant in their calculated attempt to diminish my importance. The betrayal stung even more than my parents' indifference, a cruel reminder that even those closest to you can harbor hidden resentments and betray your trust without a second thought. The weight of their betrayal settled upon me like a shroud, suffocating my spirit and poisoning my thoughts. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford, replaced by endless nights of tossing and turning, replaying the day's events in my mind, searching for answers that refused to surface. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces, their expressions etched with indifference and disdain. The crimson stain of their rejection seeped into my dreams, turning them into nightmares where I was forever chasing after their approval, only to be met with cold shoulders and dismissive words. During the day, I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, forcing myself to smile and engage in conversations, but the effort felt exhausting, like trying to breathe underwater. I couldn't concentrate on anything, my mind constantly drifting back to the moment of their betrayal, replaying the conversation I had overheard, dissecting every word and nuance. My appetite vanished, and I found myself skipping meals, the thought of food turning my stomach. I lost weight, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame, a physical manifestation of the emotional toll their actions had taken on me. The silence in the house felt deafening, amplifying the emptiness that had taken root in my heart. I tried talking to them, attempting to broach the subject of my graduation, but my efforts were met with evasiveness and deflection. My mother would change the subject, steering the conversation towards mundane topics like the weather or the latest gossip. My father would offer a perfunctory apology, his eyes glazed over with disinterest, before retreating behind his newspaper or disappearing into his study. Sarah would simply shrug, feigning ignorance and accusing me of being overly sensitive. "It's not a big deal, Addison," she would say, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're always making mountains out of molehills." Their refusal to acknowledge the pain they had inflicted only deepened my sense of isolation and resentment. I began to withdraw from them, avoiding their company and seeking refuge in my room, where I could escape their judgmental gazes and the suffocating atmosphere of their indifference. I spent hours listening to music, reading books, and writing in my journal, pouring out my thoughts and emotions onto the page, seeking solace in the written word. But even these solitary activities offered only temporary relief, the underlying ache of betrayal persisting beneath the surface. I knew that I couldn't continue living like this, trapped in a cycle of pain and resentment. I needed to find a way to break free from their control, to reclaim my life and my happiness. But the path forward seemed shrouded in darkness, and I felt lost and alone, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. I attempted to mend the fractured bonds of our family, driven by a desperate yearning for the love and acceptance I had always craved. I started small, offering to help with household chores, cooking meals, and running errands. I tried to engage my parents in conversations about their interests, hoping to find common ground and bridge the gap that had formed between us. I even bought them gifts, small tokens of my affection, hoping to elicit a positive response. But my efforts were met with indifference, or worse, thinly veiled contempt. My mother would accept my help with a perfunctory thank you, her eyes devoid of warmth. My father would dismiss my attempts at conversation, grunting noncommittally before retreating back into his world of work and responsibilities.
Sarah would mock my gestures of goodwill, accusing me of trying to buy their affection. "You think you can just make us forget what a drama queen you are?" she would sneer. "It doesn't work that way, Addison." Their rejection only fueled my determination, driving me to try even harder. I organized a family dinner, cooking everyone's favorite dishes and setting the table with care. I invited my grandparents, hoping that their presence would create a more positive atmosphere. But even this carefully planned event ended in disaster. My parents arrived late, their faces etched with annoyance. Sarah spent the entire evening glued to her phone, barely acknowledging my presence. My siblings, Mark and Emily, engaged in a heated argument, their voices escalating until my grandfather was forced to intervene. The tension in the room was palpable, suffocating the joy and warmth I had hoped to create. As I watched my family tear each other apart, I realized that my efforts were futile. They were incapable of change, trapped in their own patterns of dysfunction and resentment. I was fighting a losing battle, expending my energy on people who were unwilling to meet me halfway. The realization was crushing, extinguishing the last embers of hope that had flickered within me. The weight of injustice became a physical burden, pressing down on me with each passing day. I felt like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders, the constant ache of betrayal gnawing at my insides.
Sleepless nights were punctuated by vivid replays of their dismissals, their words echoing in the darkness, each syllable a fresh wound. The silence of my room amplified the turmoil within, the absence of comfort a constant reminder of my isolation. I began experiencing physical symptoms, headaches that throbbed in sync with my racing thoughts, stomach cramps that twisted with anxiety, and a persistent fatigue that clung to me like a shroud. My reflection in the mirror became a stranger, the spark in my eyes replaced by a dullness that mirrored the emptiness within. I tried to confide in friends, seeking solace in their understanding and support. But even their well-intentioned words felt hollow, unable to penetrate the wall of pain that surrounded me. They couldn't comprehend the depth of my betrayal, the insidious nature of my family's neglect. Their suggestions of forgiveness and reconciliation felt naive, a simplistic solution to a complex and deeply rooted problem. I felt like I was speaking a different language, unable to articulate the nuances of my experience. Their inability to fully grasp my pain only deepened my sense of isolation, reinforcing the feeling that I was alone in my struggle. The world around me seemed to continue on, oblivious to the storm raging within me. People went about their daily lives, laughing, loving, and connecting with each other, while I remained trapped in a vortex of pain and resentment.
I felt like an outsider looking in, separated from the joy and connection that everyone else seemed to take for granted. The injustice of it all was overwhelming, the sense that I had been unfairly wronged, that I deserved better than this. The weight of it threatened to crush me, to extinguish the last vestiges of my spirit. But even in the darkest depths of my despair, a flicker of defiance remained, a refusal to be completely broken by their actions. It was a small spark, barely visible, but it was enough to keep me from succumbing to the darkness. It was the seed of something new, something powerful, something that would eventually blossom into a force to be reckoned with. The day they tried to break me was the day they created their worst nightmare. I felt the last tendrils of hope wither and die. It wasn't just the missed graduation, the cruel words, or even Sarah's betrayal. It was the cumulative effect, years of being diminished, ignored, and made to feel like I was less than. I was drowning in a sea of despair, the waves of resentment crashing over me, threatening to pull me under. I stopped eating. Sleep became a distant memory, and the world seemed to fade into a muted, colorless landscape. I remember staring at my reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed stranger staring back. Was this all I was? A doormat for my family to wipe their feet on? A shadow in their carefully curated spotlight? The thought was unbearable, a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate me. I was fading, disappearing, becoming a ghost in my own life. Then came the moment I almost ended it all. I stood on the edge, the wind whipping around me, the ground a dizzying distance below. The darkness whispered promises of release, a final escape from the pain and the injustice. But then, a flicker of defiance ignited within me, a refusal to let them win. They wanted me gone, broken, silenced. And in that moment, I realized that the greatest revenge I could inflict upon them was to not give them what they wanted, to survive, to thrive, to become the person they never believed I could be. I crawled back from the abyss, dragging myself out of the darkness one agonizing step at a time. The first few days were a blur of exhaustion and emotional turmoil. I forced myself to eat, even though every bite felt like swallowing lead. I started taking long walks, seeking solace in the anonymity of the city streets. I avoided my family, retreating to my room whenever they were around, unwilling to subject myself to their toxic presence. Slowly, gradually, the fog began to lift. I started to see things more clearly, to recognize the patterned up behavior that had defined my family for so long. Their need for control, their constant comparisons, their subtle undermining of my self-esteem. It wasn't about me, I realized. It was about them, their own insecurities, their own fears, projected onto me. This realization didn't erase the pain, but it gave me a new perspective. It allowed me to see them not as all-powerful figures, but as flawed, damaged individuals, trapped in their own self-made prisons. And with that understanding came a sense of detachment, a willingness to let go of the need for their approval.
I began to focus on myself, on my own needs and desires. I started exercising, pushing my body to its limits, channeling my anger and frustration into physical activity. I rediscovered my love for reading, devouring books on psychology, philosophy, and personal growth. I started meditating, learning to quiet the chaos in my mind and find a sense of inner peace. I sought professional help, talking to a therapist who helped me process my emotions and develop coping strategies. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to rebuild myself, brick by brick, stronger and more resilient than before. The anger that had consumed me began to morph into something colder, something more calculated. It wasn't about screaming or lashing out. It was about observing, analyzing, and planning. I started paying closer attention to my family's conversations, their habits, their vulnerabilities. I listened to their complaints, their secrets, their hidden desires. I noticed the cracks in their carefully constructed facade, the fault lines that ran beneath the surface. My father's gambling addiction, hidden beneath a veneer of respectability. My mother's obsessive need for control, masking a deep-seated insecurity. Sarah's desperate need for validation, driving her to sabotage anyone who threatened her perceived superiority. Mark's laziness and entitlement, a product of years of being coddled and indulged. Emily's hidden resentment, simmering beneath a facade of compliance. They thought they were so clever, so untouchable, but they were wrong. Everyone has weaknesses, secrets they want to keep hidden, and I was determined to find them all. I started documenting everything, keeping a detailed journal of their actions, their words, their inconsistencies. I gathered evidence, collecting emails, texts, and photographs that revealed their true selves. I became a silent observer, a shadow in their lives, watching and waiting for the opportune moment to strike. I knew that revenge wouldn't bring me happiness, but it would bring me justice. It would be a way to reclaim my power, to show them that they couldn't treat me like this and get away with it. And as I meticulously planned my next move, a cold smile played on my lips. They had underestimated me for far too long. Now they were about to learn just how wrong they were.
I smiled. I played their game. I pretended to be the dutiful daughter, the compliant sister. I asked about their days, offered to help with chores, and even feigned interest in Sarah's vapid stories about her social life. But behind the facade, I was meticulously gathering information, recording every conversation, every interaction. I installed a voice-activated recorder in the living room, disguised as a decorative item. It captured everything. My father's late-night phone calls, my mother's whispered complaints to her friends, Sarah's boastful confessions to her boyfriend. I created a secure, encrypted folder on my computer, password-protected and hidden from view. This was my war room, my digital vault where I stored all the evidence I was collecting. I knew that what I was doing was risky, that if I got caught, the consequences would be severe. But the need for justice, the burning desire to expose their hypocrisy, outweighed my fear. One afternoon, while helping my mother organize her closet, I stumbled upon a hidden box filled with old financial documents. Inside, I found evidence of my father's gambling debts, amounting to tens of thousands of dollars. He had been secretly draining the family's savings account, putting our financial security at risk. This was a major breakthrough, a chink in his carefully constructed armor. I photographed every document, making sure to capture every detail, every number, every signature. Another time, while borrowing Sarah's laptop, I discovered a series of emails between her and a college professor. The emails revealed that she had been plagiarizing her assignments, cheating her way through her courses. She had built her entire reputation on lies and deceit. I copied the emails onto a flash drive, adding them to my growing collection of evidence. It wasn't easy. There were close calls, moments when I thought I was about to be discovered. Like the time my father walked into the living room while I was checking the recorder. I quickly pretended to be reading a book, my heart pounding in my chest. Or the time Sarah asked to borrow my computer, forcing me to frantically delete my browser history and empty the recycle bin. But I managed to stay one step ahead, always careful, always vigilant. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I knew that the moment of reckoning was approaching, that soon I would unleash the truth and watch their world crumble around them. The hardest part was containing my anger, maintaining the facade of normalcy while plotting their downfall. There were times when I wanted to scream, to confront them with their lies and betrayals,
But I knew that I had to be patient, that the longer I waited, the more devastating the impact would be.
I began researching the laws in our state, consulting with a friend who was studying law. I needed to make sure that everything I was doing was legal, that I wasn't exposing myself to any legal repercussions. I learned about defamation, invasion of privacy, and the rules of evidence. I discovered that in our state, it was legal to record conversations as long as one party consented. Since I was a party to most of the conversations I was recording, I was within my rights. However, I needed to be careful about distributing the recordings, as that could potentially lead to legal trouble. I also learned about the process of filing a complaint with the university regarding Sarah's plagiarism. I discovered that the university had a strict code of conduct and that plagiarism was a serious offense that could result in expulsion. I gathered all the necessary forms and documents, preparing to file a formal complaint as soon as the time was right. I even consulted with a forensic accountant, seeking advice on how to best present the evidence of my father's gambling debts. The accountant explained how to trace the money, how to identify the accounts where the money had been deposited, and how to calculate the total amount that had been lost. He also warned me about the potential legal consequences for my father, including fines and possible jail time. The more I learned, the more confident I became. I realized that I had the power to expose their lies and hold them accountable for their actions. It was no longer just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about protecting myself and ensuring that they couldn't continue to hurt me or anyone else. I started to visualize the moment when I would reveal the truth. I imagined their faces, their expressions of shock, disbelief, and horror. I pictured them being confronted with their lies, their secrets exposed for all to see. I fantasized about watching their carefully constructed world crumble around them, their reputations tarnished, their lives in ruins. But I also knew that I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. I had to remain calm, rational, and strategic. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Everything had to be perfect. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to gather evidence, refine my plan, and prepare for the final showdown. The anticipation was building, a crescendo of excitement and dread. I knew that the moment of truth was fast approaching, that soon I would unleash my carefully crafted plan and change my life forever. The air in the house grew thick with anticipation. It felt like the seconds were stretching, each one a tiny hammer blow against my skull. I knew I was close, so close I could taste it. Their downfall was imminent, and I was the architect. Then came the discovery that changed everything. I was helping my mother sort through some old family photos, a task she usually reserved for herself. She was sentimental about the past, clinging to idealized versions of events that bore little resemblance to reality. As she rambled on about some long-forgotten vacation, I casually flipped through the albums, my eyes scanning for anything of interest. And then I saw it. Tucked away in the back of a dusty album was a faded photograph of my father, much younger, standing next to a woman who was definitely not my mother. They were embracing, their faces close, their eyes filled with a tenderness that I had never seen in my father's gaze. On the back of the photo was a handwritten inscription, "Forever yours." A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just a casual fling. This was something deeper, something more significant. My father had been living a lie for decades, betraying my mother and building his entire life on a foundation of deceit. This was the ultimate weapon, the one secret that could shatter their world completely. I knew that I had to act fast. The information was too explosive to keep to myself for long. I started to devise a plan, a way to reveal the truth in a way that would maximize the impact. I decided to stage a family dinner, a seemingly innocent gathering where I would unveil my findings. I knew that my family would never agree to a genuine reconciliation, so I presented it as an opportunity to clear the air, to finally address the misunderstandings that had been plaguing us for so long. I even used Sarah's upcoming birthday as a pretext, suggesting that it would be a nice way to celebrate as a family. My parents were hesitant at first, but Sarah was enthusiastic about the idea. She loved being the center of attention, and the prospect of a lavish dinner in her honor was too tempting to resist. I booked a private room at their favorite restaurant, a place where they had celebrated countless birthdays and anniversaries.
The setting was perfect, elegant, sophisticated, and familiar. It would be the ideal backdrop for their public humiliation. I sent out the invitations, carefully crafting the wording to create a sense of anticipation and intrigue. I hinted at a special announcement, without revealing the true nature of my intentions. I wanted them to come with a sense of curiosity, a sense of hope that things might finally be getting better.
The day of the dinner arrived, and I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. I spent hours getting ready, carefully selecting my outfit and perfecting my makeup. I wanted to look confident, composed, and in control. I arrived at the restaurant early, making sure that everything was in place. I had arranged for a slideshow to be projected onto the wall, featuring a selection of family photos. But hidden among the innocent snapshots were the incriminating images I had collected. The photo of my father with his mistress, the emails proving Sarah's plagiarism, the financial documents detailing my father's gambling debts. I had also prepared a speech, a carefully worded statement that would expose their lies and betrayals without being overly emotional or accusatory. I wanted to present the facts in a calm, rational manner, allowing the evidence to speak for itself. As my family began to arrive, I greeted them with a warm smile, feigning an enthusiasm that I didn't feel. My parents seemed wary, sensing that something was amiss. Sarah, on the other hand, was giddy with excitement, basking in the attention and anticipation. Mark and Emily were their usual apathetic selves, barely acknowledging my presence. We sat down at the table, the atmosphere thick with tension. The waiter brought out the appetizers, and we made small talk, avoiding any sensitive topics. But I could feel the weight of the impending confrontation pressing down on me, threatening to suffocate me. I knew that the moment of truth was fast approaching, that soon I would unleash the storm that I had been brewing for so long. "Before we start the celebration," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I wanted to share something with all of you. A little trip down memory lane." I gestured to the slideshow, and the images began to appear on the wall. There were pictures of us as children, of family vacations, of graduations and weddings. My family watched with a mixture of nostalgia and boredom, unaware of what was about to come. As the slideshow progressed, I subtly increased the pace, interspersing the innocent images with the incriminating ones. At first, they didn't notice anything amiss. But then, the photo of my father with his mistress flashed on the screen, and the room fell silent. My mother gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. My father paled, his face contorting with a mixture of fear and anger. Sarah stared at the image in stunned silence, her mouth agape. Mark and Emily exchanged confused glances, unsure of what was happening. I continued to narrate, my voice unwavering, as the slideshow revealed the rest of my findings. The emails proving Sarah's plagiarism, the financial documents detailing my father's gambling debts, the recordings of their private conversations. Each image was a hammer blow, shattering their carefully constructed facade and exposing their true selves. By the time the slideshow ended, the room was filled with a deafening silence. My family sat frozen, their faces etched with shock, disbelief, and horror. I had finally done it. I had exposed their lies, their secrets, their betrayals. And now, it was time to watch their world crumble around them. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest, and prepared to deliver the final blow. "There's one more thing I think you all need to hear," I said, reaching for my phone. "A little recording I made." My finger hovered over the play button. The room was silent. You could hear a pin drop. That's when Sarah screamed. Sarah's scream pierced the silence, a high-pitched shriek that echoed through the room. It was the sound of her perfect world shattering, of her carefully constructed facade crumbling to dust. "You wouldn't," she hissed, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. "You wouldn't dare." I just smiled, a cold, detached smile that mirrored the emptiness I felt inside. "Oh, but I would," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "And I will." With a deliberate motion, I pressed play on my phone. The recording began,
filling the room with the sounds of their private conversations, their whispered secrets, their callous betrayals. It started with my father's late-night phone calls, his voice low and intimate as he professed his love for another woman. My mother flinched, her face contorting with pain as she heard the words that confirmed her worst fears. Then came Sarah's boastful confessions to her boyfriend, detailing how she had cheated her way through college, plagiarizing her assignments, and manipulating her professors. Her face flushed crimson as she heard her own voice betraying her, exposing her lies for all to hear. The recording continued, revealing the extent of my father's gambling debts, his reckless spending, and his blatant disregard for our family's financial security. My mother's eyes welled up with tears as she realized the depth of his betrayal, the extent to which he had jeopardized our future. The room was filled with a palpable tension, a sense of impending doom. My family sat frozen, their faces etched with shock, disbelief, and horror. They knew that their secrets were out in the open, that their lies had been exposed, that their carefully constructed world was about to collapse around them. As the recording reached its climax, I watched their faces crumble, their composure shatter, their lives unravel before my very eyes. My father's face was a mask of fury, his eyes blazing with rage. He lunged across the table, his hand outstretched, as if to silence me, to stop the recording, to erase the truth. But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. My mother sat in stunned silence, her eyes fixed on my father, her face a mixture of pain, betrayal, and disillusionment. She had spent her entire life believing in him, trusting him, loving him. And now, she realized that he was a fraud, a liar, a cheat.
Sarah was a complete wreck, her makeup smeared, her hair disheveled, her reputation tarnished. Her dreams of a successful career, of a glamorous social life, of a perfect future had all been shattered. Mark and Emily, who had always been indifferent to the drama of our family, were now staring at their parents and sister with a mixture of confusion and disgust. They had never realized the extent of their deceit, the depth of their hypocrisy. I watched as the waiter, who had been hovering nearby, discreetly called the manager. I knew that the police would be arriving soon, that my father would likely be facing charges, that Sarah would be expelled from college, that my mother's life would be forever changed. The aftermath was swift and brutal. My father was escorted out of the restaurant in handcuffs, facing charges of fraud and embezzlement. Sarah's university launched an investigation into her academic record, and she was promptly expelled for plagiarism. My mother filed for divorce, seeking to rebuild her life after decades of betrayal. Mark and Emily distanced themselves from the family, seeking to create their own identities, free from the toxic legacy of their parents and sister. As for me, I walked away from the wreckage, feeling a sense of closure, a sense of justice served. I knew that revenge wouldn't bring me happiness, but it had brought me peace. It had allowed me to reclaim my power, to expose their lies, to hold them accountable for their actions. They had lost everything: their reputations, their careers, their families, their freedom. And I just smiled. It wasn't a triumphant smile or a vindictive smile. It was a sad smile, a knowing smile, a smile that acknowledged the pain and the destruction that had been wrought. I knew that I would never be the same, that the scars of their betrayal would remain with me forever. But I also knew that I had done what was necessary, that I had protected myself and others from their deceit, that I had stood up for what was right. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Sometimes the only way to heal is to expose the darkness, to confront the lies, to seek justice for the wrongs that have been committed. It's not about seeking pleasure in the pain of others. It's about reclaiming your power, about protecting yourself, about ensuring that those who have hurt you are held accountable for their actions. And in the end, that's all that matters. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.